and welcome to another video on running technique and running injury. Today we're going to look at another very common running injury, which is Achilles tendonitis. This is something that a lot of you watching this will have either had or have had in the past, and it's one of those where it doesn't seem to go away very quickly. It does sort of niggle away for a long period of time. Also, if you research your symptoms online, it will most likely come back with a lot of different things that you should do or shouldn't be doing, and it's easy to get lost in all that information, especially seeing as though a lot of it isn't necessarily correct. So therefore, to add a bit of clarity to all that, the purpose of this video is to take you through two potential causes and what you can do in order to combat it.
The first cause is to do with foot strike. Now, I'm not going to use this as an opportunity to start debating which foot strike is best, because that's a different topic for a different video. However, one thing that I think is pretty much a given is the fact that running right up on your toes without giving your heel the opportunity to touch the floor at all is not suitable for a distance runner. Obviously, sprinters adopt this method, but if we were to try and do this mile after mile over a long distance, then it means we're going to be engaging the calf muscles all the while, which means the Achilles is also going to be put under constant strain, especially at foot strike where the calf is undergoing eccentric contractions, i.e. lengthening under tension. You can see in the video how the heels are not touching the floor. So the solution here is quite simple. Change your method of foot strike so you're not loading the calf as much. I would argue in this scenario that heel striking will be better in order to offload the calves more effectively, except maybe when doing quicker intervals, etc. But if you are the type of runner who is convinced that heel striking is the root of all evil, or even maybe a full-blown minimalist barefoot runner who typically adopts a forefoot strike, then at least try to change your foot strike pattern so that there is at least a brief period during your stride where the heel is in contact with the floor. So even though the calf will still be under a lot of eccentric lengthening stress following the first contact of the foot with the ground, because essentially you're landing with the outside of your forefoot, it will at least mean there will be a brief period of relaxation for these muscles. Essentially, the key take-home message here is unless you are sprinting at your absolute maximum top speed, then you should at least let the heel touch the ground briefly.
The second cause is to do with our lifestyles, specifically sitting, for example, in our cars or sitting at our office desks. Now, it's obviously very commonplace nowadays. In fact, sitting is often referred to as the new smoking in terms of the health effects that it can have. However, for the purposes of this video, I'm more interested in the biomechanical effects.
Now, there is a theory I'm going to cover which has some research evidence to support it. Now, I say that tentatively because it is a relatively new research area and more needs to be done to confirm its efficacy. However, it does seem coherent and make a lot of sense. And this is to do with the idea that our body is linked via chains of connective tissue known as fascia, which essentially wraps around our muscles, forming a protective layer. And the tissue links our muscles together, forming chains up and down the body. It essentially explains how if one area of the body tightens up, another will also tighten as a consequence, and this will result potentially in pain. So if we think about our typical office worker who sits down all day, chronically shortening their hamstrings, it's likely to have an effect going down the body, into the calf, and of course into the Achilles. Therefore, directing all of your attention to the Achilles itself when attempting to treat Achilles pain isn't necessarily the right thing to do, as this is an example of how pain in one area is linked to dysfunction in another. This, of course, is potentially more significant if you are an individual who has a large amount of fascia, as some people have thicker fascia than others and hence a more naturally tight body type.
So how do we combat this? Well, the first obvious thing to do will be to improve the flexibility of our hamstring and calf muscles by stretching them out. However, there are a few areas where people fall down with stretching. There are a few common mistakes that people make. So firstly, they don't do it enough, and secondly, when they do it, people tend to not hold the stretches for long enough. So sometimes people only hold for about 10 to 15 seconds, which isn't enough to gain a flexibility improvement. So for this, I would recommend holding for at least a minute. So that's static stretching, but also I would recommend, if you can, trying to implement a few PNF stretches into your routine as well. And if you don't know what PNF stretching is, then there's an example of how to use this technique on your hamstrings in the 30-day strength challenge. But of course, we need to address why the hamstrings and calves are getting tight in the first place. And I think a lot of the time, the cause for that is to do with the pelvis. So there's some issues and dysfunctions that need to be addressed around here. So for example, when we're sitting down at our office desks or in our cars, if we do this for too long, we're going to be shortening through the hip flexor muscles, which will pull the pelvis into this anteriorly tilted position. But then this position of the pelvis will actually lengthen out the hamstrings. So the hamstrings are actually undergoing lengthening stress in conjunction with the fact that they're an inflexible muscle, because again, you're shortening them by sitting down all day. So therefore, it's hardly surprising that we're going to end up getting a lot of tension all the way down the chain, potentially as far down as the Achilles. So we need to address this sort of pelvic issue, and some good things to do are to strengthen the core, strengthen the glute muscles to pull it back into this sort of neutral position. And again, there's some examples of some strength exercises for the core and the glutes in the 30-day strength challenge. Sports massage is also good at controlling the symptoms, at least until you get a more permanent biomechanical effect by strengthening up and correcting this alignment up here. So it is very effective at releasing off the muscle and the connective tissue. But finally, and I cannot emphasize this point enough, do book in for a full biomechanical assessment if you have an injury, particularly if it's been going on for a long period of time as well. Because it's all well and good looking at videos like this online, and they are generally very useful. However, you have to bear in mind the fact that it's not necessarily going to be specific for you. At the start of this video, I mentioned the fact that there are potentially lots of different causes for injuries such as Achilles tendonitis. So in order to be sure that you're actually targeting the cause, you will need to sort of book in for a full assessment. However, I do hope that this video has at least been helpful in some way at providing a solution to your issues. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.